on this part, we finally have, since the last podcast, all finished Final Fantasy VII Remake. So in the last segment, we are going to be, it's not a full review yet, we're just going to be discussing the end. It's a very controversial end, so the first thing we'll start with is saying that there are tons of spoilers. We're not.
If
we're
you
not
haven't
holding back
beaten the
on anything.
game and you plan on beating the game, please do not listen to.
Or if
what
you
we're
were
gonna
someone who
talk
was
about.
gonna buy the game and beat the game, but then decided not to buy the game after hearing about the ending, just be careful. You know, there are tons of spoilers here.
Shout out to my boy James. James was along for the ride for pretty much all of my live stream of the game.
That's how he
was
saves
watching
money.
it with me, and he was commenting, and we were having a lot of fun with it. And then we got to the end, and PlayStation unfortunately cut off the stream. As soon
It's
as
done on purpose.
as soon as you reach, as soon as you're about to get on the motorcycle, it just stops. And I thought it was going to cut off in just the cutscene, but then it just continued to cut off for the next like hour.
I was really tempted to record that whole last segment anyways using my Elgato and just put it up, but as I said, I was too at that point. I wanted it to be like if I was going to put it up, just putting up a second playthrough of it's kind of weird. And then I didn't want to be like distracted by the fact I was streaming it. I wanted to be like fully immersed in when I was playing it. I didn't want to take the time after I got there to stop and go all set it up because I just wanted to beat this damn game.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll give general synopsis of what kind of elements we're talking about the ending. A lot of controversy over the fact that this is possibly not a full remake of the game. It could be a sequel, some sort of alternate timeline, alternate dimensions. You know, lots of elements at play here, or there could be, anyways. And there's a lot to be said about that, right? There's a lot of big Final Fantasy VII fans out there, and it seems like the community is pretty divided on as to whether or not this is a good thing or bad thing. Obviously, we'll discuss whether or not we personally think it's a good thing or bad thing. We'll kind of go through some of the ending chapter, like gameplay and stuff like that too, and stuff we liked about it. And then also, if you guys have any friends you've talked to, like obviously Phil, you're talking about your friend James. I've talked to I think like 3 different friends about it too, and kind of got their reception of it. Even like these are people who haven't played the game; these are just Final Fantasy VII fans, and they kind of have heard about the ending and just like what they kind of thought about it.
Now, I do want to preface this and say, when we did our initial thoughts, and I was talking about how one thing I read said that it's like Kingdom Hearts, and when I brought that up, all 3 of us were like, "No, that's not true at all." I'm going to say that that's actually 100% true. The ending is definitely Kingdom Hearts.
The final boss is definitely Kingdom Hearts as fuck.
The final boss was super. Well, not the final boss was technically Sephiroth. He wasn't Kingdom Hearts.
Okay, well, yeah, no.
But yeah, the one thing was basically just the.
He was in all the games.
But yeah, the one thing was basically just the big Heartless from all the games. But just like the whole plot about like the time traveling or the alternate dimensions and that kind of stuff, because both things are there. A lot of people think it's time travel creating alternate dimensions. Like, have you guys seen videos on all the theories and stuff like that after beating the game?
I was going to, but then I started my second playthrough, so I didn't.
I will say, okay, so I obviously have the least amount of knowledge when it comes to this game.
Correct.
So I personally thought that I thought the motorcycle was going to be the end. Like, I thought that you would walk through the like portal at the end and you might fight Sephiroth right there, and that would be it. I really wasn't expecting that last section where you fight the 3 different entities and then you fight the big guy. And then you fight Sephiroth. But I'm going to be honest, the entire ending, I was like, what the fuck is going on? I'm like, who's this black-haired Cloud? You know.
I was confused. I mentioned him multiple times talking to you, but I understand that you never knew who he was anyway. So did you have subtitles on the game? Because they say his name.
I did, yeah. So I did see that it was Zach. And then at the end of everything, I went and watched 2 explanations for the ending, and it made a little bit more sense. But because obviously, like we're in a group chat, all 3 of us, and I didn't want to ruin anything for Andrew, so I was messaging Cam about it, and I'm like, Cam, you were right about something, because Cam had originally said that you believe that Crisis Core, I think that's the name of it.
Yeah.
Crisis Core was going to have a pretty big impact
Well, I
on
think
this game.
they refuse to ever do anything with Crisis Core. They'll never remaster anything like that. So I thought what they were going to do then is they were just going to use cutscenes, flashbacks, and maybe even some parts where you play as Zack in the future parts. Like for the flashbacks, I thought well, at this point I didn't know anything about Zack being alive, possibly, or any of that kind of stuff. But I thought a lot of the Zack parts you would just play through as a flashback section of playing as Zack and just show some of the important parts of Crisis Core.
So it was kind of cool that you called that in advance, and I kind of understood who he was, but after watching the explanation, it made a lot more sense. But then I'm also happy that we're all on the same page. Like it took away a lot of the criticisms I had initially because I was like, why are they spending so much time on Midgard? Why are they padding this with all these side quests when, there's 35 hours more of the game? This doesn't make any sense. But now I do personally think that that's all off the table. I think that they're going to cut a lot of the game. I don't think that you guys are going to see what you're expecting from 7. And if you do, it's just going to play out completely different. Now, I'm going to say a spoiler that was already ruined for me that I'm sure a lot of people already know about. But if you haven't played the original 7, just fast forward for 2 seconds.
Aerith
I'm going to
dies.
say this. Yes.
What? She does?
So after our podcast last week, I was telling Cam, and I think, yeah, I was just telling Cam. I'm following a bunch of different like hip hop pages on Facebook, and like a new video for a rapper came out, and I was like reading through some of the comments, and one of the comments was just like Aerith dies in Final Fantasy VII, and this was before the remake came out. So I was like, what the fuck? And then like it just stuck in my head where I just could never get it out, and now I'll constantly see that. But I'm happy because now who's to say if she dies? We don't know.
True.
We don't know if they're going to explore the chat, like the section that you really like either, Birch. Like that's the issue.
They better fucking go to Cosmo Canyon. That's it.
What if they don't? Though?
They will.
Are you going to be upset?
Realistically, I just want to go there for the music.
But the thing is, they're gonna go there though because you still have Red 13 on your team, and you still need to learn about his backstory and all that kind of stuff.
You'll have to go to Nibelheim. You will. I don't know if you'll see Sid's Town. I can't remember its name. It's been a while.
I don't know. I think we have different opinions on what'll happen, like in the future parts. Just leading off this, but the main. So I don't know if Birch, if you haven't looked this up, a lot of the main theories are basically that either Sephiroth time travels to the future and learns about the fact that he loses, very Kingdom Hearts like, and then he goes back, he goes back to like change the timeline, which is like all these like visions you're having of Sephiroth as Cloud and all that kind of stuff, and then by doing so, like you basically create a new timeline starting from now. You even there's like the Arbiters of Fate kind of people, which one fights with a sword, one fights with a gun, and one fights with their fist, representing it. And if you read their bio, it says they're here to like keep the regular time flow. Like they're here to save the regular time, and then you beat them and you destroy them. So that kind of leads you to thinking now you're on a different time flow. And then the big clue to that too is that the entire game, the game's pointing you out to like who Stamp is and what Stamp is, and he's like the the Beagle. The entire game, and then at the very end when the whole Zack thing happens, they literally recreated the exact scene from Crisis Core, except for the end of that scene in Crisis Core, it doesn't.
Somebody's not there.
It doesn't go very well for Zack, right? And this one, there's the explosion of light, but then Zack wins, and there's no more soldiers, and then the bag of chips, or whatever it is, or the poster, flies by.
It's different,
and it's a different dog that's Stamp. It's a Schnauzer, which hints like that. Small hints are like that's a different timeline. It's a different dog being Stamped now, but at the same time, it could simply be the stuff that happened with Zack was 6 or 7 years ago. So it could have just been a different Stamp at that time, right? They could have had a different mascot dog 6 or 7 years ago. You have no idea. That could just be a hint, but there's a lot of like vagueness to it.
The flashbacks, or like, do you think they're flashbacks? Like when Red 13's like running along, do you think that that's a flashback, or if it's a flash forward?
That's a flash forward.
That's a flash forward.
All those scenes are from something. That one's from that's the same scene from the beginning of Advent Children.
Child.
Yeah, that's
the end of Advent Children. Yeah.
But one of the videos that I was watching was explaining that it's a flashback, and
wrong.
it's basically but it's basically explaining that it's showing like what has already happened.
I'm pretty sure, going off the look of it, that's an exact scene from Advent Children, I'm pretty sure. A lot of the stuff
and
in
that's
there...
showing the end where it's back to peaceful and all that shit.
Couldn't it be showing the other timeline as this is already playing out?
It could have been,
they're kind of aware of it?
It could have been something that happens in the timeline in the original Final Fantasy game. There's also obviously...
That's what I'm saying.
There's obviously...
Like going off the idea of Sephiroth, like OG Final Fantasy VII Sephiroth coming into like the remake.
The general idea is that since they're having like this fight with Destiny, they are seeing flashes of the other timeline. But then since they beat the fight, since they win the fight and they destroy the Arbiter, supposed to keep the time flow steady and all that kind of stuff. And since they decided to walk in there and change it, that it is now a different timeline. So it is like perfect. Yep. And then after that too, like you get the text at the end, which is like, what was it? It's like
you have 5 seconds or whatever.
No, I still have no idea what the fuck that means at all, because then you're just back with all of them and like
you have, wasn't it 7 seconds or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you have 7 seconds, and then it just everything.
That makes no sense. But at the very end, it says like
the unknown journey.
Yeah, like
the
unknown journey continues, or Ella was very, very obviously hinting the fact that you don't know what's going to happen. A lot of people online have been speculating that like Tifa's going to die instead of Aerith, and so help me God, if that happens, I'm going to be mad.
I think more than you would be mad.
But the thing
that's
is,
why I'm saying that they're going to cut shit. That's why I don't think, like I was saying earlier, my hot take is that this is only going to be a 2-part game. This isn't going to be 3 or 4.
I think 3 still, but that's optimistic.
I still think 3 too. I don't think they're going to use this as an opportunity to cut unimportant stuff. But as we've discussed before, I still think you could fit the rest of all the Final Fantasy game into. Maybe you could even stretch it to 2 parts if they made it like slightly longer, or 3 by taking out all the useless shit that didn't need to happen, all the traversing, all the random battles, all the world map, that kind of stuff.
But why would they change? Why would they change the ending like that just to go and have you do everything the exact same?
I think small changes would be more subtle. Like if they just start the second game and the entire thing's completely different. Red's like, yo, let's go to Cosmo Camp. They're like, nah, fuck, we're going right to Sephiroth. And then it's like the end of part 2 and they go fight him or whatever. And then
that'd be trash.
Yeah, and then he goes to kill Aerith and then fucking he slips on a banana peel and falls over or something instead. Like I think that would legitimately ruin the game.
You're missing half your party right now.
How OP would you be though come like the 3rd or 4th game? Like are you just gonna have like 15 spots of materia? Are all of your like weapons going to be OP as fuck? Like I don't understand how they're going to do that.
I think you'll just restart every game.
Yeah, you're either going to restart the game, but Cam will know what I'm talking about. I think it's 3rd disc. Something happens to somebody, and he forgets stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you could just count that as like a mind wipe, and you start fresh.
True, I don't know when that would count. Or like, yeah, once again, Yuffie could take all your shit. Yeah. Steal it all. It's all gone.
We talked about it last week. I don't know where you guys stood on it, but
I thought at that time that you would just continue, like they'd keep going. But I changed my mind since playing.
Transfer the save.
Yeah, I changed my mind. I don't
think max level, because max level is what, 50?
Yeah.
I think they'll bump it down. You'll start maybe this game at like this. Let's say it's 3 parts. You'll start this game at 25, level 25 or something like that.
How are they going to scale that for people though?
What do you mean? You'll just start the game.
You'll start no matter what level you were when you finished part 1. You'll start into 25 part 2.
And then you just have to gain materia and everything again.
Probably. They'll probably have
or they will give you an average of what you have, because already it's weird because when you beat Final Fantasy VII. Like this remake, there is a good chance you have already Firaga, you already have Blizarga. That was pretty late in the, like not late, but it was definitely not in Midgar where you got those enhanced.
They have to give you the only thing that I would say they actually don't give you is all the limit breaks. You only have 2 limit breaks by the time you beat the game.
Yeah.
Well, in Final Fantasy VII,
Sephiroth is the main villain. You've already. Is he not like who's the is he not the final boss in the original game?
He is.
Okay.
He's
but
not.
I still wouldn't say he's the villain.
He's not like. I'm gonna, without any spoilers, I'm gonna say other than the time you fight him as the final boss, you don't actually fight Sephiroth any other times in Final Fantasy VII.
But I mean, how are they going if everything remains the same? Like, how are they going to do like 2 and 3, like a second and third part? Like, you've already faced like this super strong guy. In the second part, are you going to just fight like an even stronger guy, and then in the third
There's
part,
no such thing.
fight Sephiroth again?
Do you know what Dragon Ball Z is, Phil?
Yeah, but I mean, I just don't know if that works in modern gaming.
I was still really surprised that I thought the final boss in this game, because once again we didn't think it was all going to be troll at this time. I wouldn't have been surprised if the final boss was either like a Rufus fight, which did end up happening, a Heidegger fight, but then I knew he couldn't lose or he couldn't die anyways, or I thought it was going to be like Roche. I thought he was.
I was going to say I called that shit
because he is a new character.
This episode.
He is
Fuck
a new
you.
character added in who they made around Cloud's power level. Like, you kind of beat him, but like he never really loses that bad kind of thing. And he's a character that can easily use the last boss, because I'm like, they can't use Sephiroth as the last boss in this game because you can't just make Sephiroth the boss every single part. Like,
fuck you, they can.
I think what I mean. Like,
I think if there was 3 parts, they
wouldn't
make him the boss of part 2.
Like, no, I feel like they
won't make him the boss in part 2. He'll boss in part 1, and then in 3.
It's just the epicness of the ending and how like larger than life it seemed, and the fight, like you fight all of these other bosses and they're at this one scale, and then your fight with him is just like out of this world, just crazy.
I kind of question if your party remembers it.
Yeah,
because
I was thinking that too.
When they come out, there's no explanation to any of them. They're not like, whoa, what the fuck just happened? Am I right? Like, all that shit. I was just on a fucking plane with Sephiroth, and he said, I got 7 seconds. Like, there's no question that they're like, oh, where do we go now? And he's like, oh, we go find Sephiroth kind of thing. Like, that's how the original one ends. They leave Midgard, and they go after to find Sephiroth. I question if, like, everything that happened there, if they remember it, or after since they started fighting, like, Destiny kind of thing, if they set the time, like, the new time thing, and then it, like, they like forgot about it and they just kind of think they're leaving Midgar. Like, I question that a little bit, but I definitely think there's gonna be changes. But I think they're gonna try and stick more towards the same type of timeline, but then have the changes be more subtle, so they're more like dramatic when they happen. Because if they just start part 2 with everything being changed, then it's like you expect everything to be changed. But if they start on kind of the exact same path, everything's going the same way, but then there's one big difference, or like one thing has changed or something like that, or you like notice there's like little small hints, I think that would be smarter.
What if they just call it Final Fantasy VII 2, and actually it be a sequel, like a true sequel to the remake?
I don't know, because they would also.
Do you not think that they could do that? I definitely do.
I don't think they will. I mean, I think you can do anything.
It'll be another part.
I think they'll just call it Final Fantasy VII Part 2, or Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then a title name or something.
It'll be Final Fantasy VII Remake, something dumb as Kingdom Hearts, like Birth by Sleep. And that'll be the title.
Death by Nap.
Like Requiem of Sephiroth or something.
No,
stupid.
it's Death by Nap. I've already decided.
Ooh, yeah, there you go.
But yeah, the big question to me is more of the Zack stuff in this.
Yep.
I still don't think he's alive. Because technically, the whole thing about time, or if he is, there's going to be another timeline dimension that's beside them, not in the same timeline as them. Because if he was alive, then as soon as he became alive, once they changed it, they would have remembered him there. Now you could argue that there wasn't enough time for us to establish if they did or not, but it feels pretty obvious. So he's still probably going to be dead. But maybe how he died changes, or like he's going to be alive in a separate timeline, and we're going to play as him in like a separate timeline or something. Like
that would be dumb as hell.
Welcome to JRPGs, Phil.
Yeah, that's not the dumbest thing I've heard of.
I mean, because I think that there's a
the fact is though, by them doing this though, Phil, they open up all these questions. We wouldn't have been if once we finished Final Fantasy VII Remake, if none of this changed, we'd have nothing to talk about. If it went the exact same as the first game, and we know then what's coming in the second game, we wouldn't need to have these end game discussions. There wouldn't be all this talk about it, even if it's controversial. This is still talk. We'd just be like,
but
okay,
I think the criticism that games like Kingdom Hearts, although all 3 of us like it, the criticisms that those games get is kind of valid sometimes, And I could understand someone who doesn't like those games being like, "What the fuck is this ending? Why are they doing time travel? Why are they doing this? Why are they
I
doing
still
that?"
will always to this day say someone who said they don't like Kingdom Hearts 3 because it was convoluted. Those people should probably just die because all
they don't understand the series.
No, because like the entire it started convoluted as hell. It made no sense when it came out. You just accepted that. You're like, sick. I like the Disney characters. Goofy's a badass.
There are 9 games in that series, and if you only played 1, 2, and 3.
But to me, like,
but even if you play all 9, I feel like you don't fully understand.
Listen, if you play all 9 and you look up all the side story and you check out the cell phone game story and you start to really make sense.
Game. My bad.
That's been going on for years. But the thing is, like, let's say this is like the most basic plot. Okay, it's that. Because Sephiroth is pretty fucking powerful, and this game has all sorts of time magic and shit like that. Let's say Sephiroth, before he dies or before he loses, either he goes back in time to tell young Sephiroth about what happens, or young Sephiroth goes ahead in time and finds out that he loses, kind of thing. So then he time travels back to try and make himself win. Like, other than that, if they keep the plot the same way, the plot doesn't really change that much. It's like, it's not Kingdom Hearts level convoluted. It's just about one character use time travel to try and stop himself from losing. Like, it's a pretty simple...
If they start having alternate timelines where you play as somebody else who's... I feel like that's when you're going to get into the waters of being convoluted.
Even if they don't do alternate timelines where you play as Zack, I still think they're going to do some sort of thing where you play as Zack, like even if it's a flashback or something. Because as I said, they're not going to rely on people looking up, playing, or in the future playing Crisis Core. They have to expect no one to know what the hell it is, and then to go in like that. So they have to show you context for that, because it wasn't really that well shown in the original Final Fantasy game.
If I had no idea, if I didn't watch that video or talk to you, then I wouldn't understand who the hell Zack is either.
I mean, there was a bunch of hints. Someone even said his name in the game. They just said it so you couldn't hear it. That's all.
Yes, the boyfriend, right?
Yeah. Yes. Like there are hints in it.
She hints at that a couple times too.
Yeah, I mean the mom. I don't know if the mom really hints at it very strongly. But
when you're in the cave or in the tunnel, she's just like, "Oh, do you know any people in your group or anything like that?" And he's like, "Nope, don't remember anybody."
No, dog. There's a lot of... The reason I don't want the game to change too much is because there's a lot of really good story elements that I'm not even going to discuss here because it's still a spoiler for you, Phil, that I don't want them to skip out. And they can't. Like, without spoiling... all the backstory to Cloud, basically. Like, the Cloud Zack backstory, they can't skip that. It's part of Cloud's character, even in this current timeline. It has to be addressed no matter what. And that's, like, the parts that are all my favorite parts of 7... because I find them to be like the only really good parts of the story. Because the actual basic story of 7, I think, is pretty shit. But all the good storylines, like all the good character storylines, they still have to go through. Like they can't do the game without it because it's required. Like they're the main characters, and this is something they've already hinted at and hasn't been addressed, so they have to do it. So I'm not too worried.
But if they're acting as if this is technically a true sequel,
it still wouldn't matter though because
then they can just assume that you've already played the original.
I don't think they would though, because I don't even think they're really technically that would be them saying that they only want people who have played the original to play this game. Then they would specifically market that
accessible to everybody.
Yeah, they would especially like Final Fantasy has been doing that now forever. They've all been even like 15. They're like marketed as like the newcomers and the old comers kind of thing. They're not going to release a game.
But I think
like
if you haven't played the original, then the ending is just it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, but it's a part 1. They expect people. They want to give you a cliffhanger at the end anyways to then go into part 2. Even if you had never played the first game, it's no different than like finishing Kingdom Hearts 2, not having played Kingdom Hearts 3 yet. Like, like you would go in and be like, this makes no fucking sense. Sure, it's not going to make sense when you play 3 either, but they want you to be like, why doesn't this make sense? In the next game you're going to go in, they're going to explain who Zack is at some point in the next game, and you're going to be like, oh, now that makes sense to me.
Yes, but I think it's like the Sephiroth stuff that is kind of playing on the old timeline is the old game, so the old game does work as canon for the new game, right?
Well, yeah, like as far as we're guessing, like most of these are just like theories.
They're all assumptions. Like
I still think that it's only going to be. It's harder with the whole coronavirus stuff right now, but I still like if it wasn't for this, I still think a game would like the next part would have came out next year. I don't know about now. Now it might be.
Put my money on it being announced this year, like December. For next year.
Yeah, I don't now I might be leaning towards like March 2022. like exactly 2 years from when it came out. But I think that if all this stuff right now didn't happen, I think it would have been coming out in 2021, even if it was late 2021.
Yep.
I stand by that.
No, man.
I'm gonna segue back, and I'm not gonna say because Phil hasn't gotten to the part yet, even though it's in the first 5 hours. So one of the biggest changes is someone is there.
Biggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, Phil already we discussed this before about like, and especially because
Jesse
Biggs and Wedge
Jesse
all
Biggs
died.
and Wedge, they all died, yeah.
On the after the second reactor.
A lot of people also think that Jesse isn't dead because like when Biggs wakes up there, his headband's there, but her glove is also there. People think that's kind of like she's not dead. And like Wedge,
so Wedge is the only one who died.
But Wedge just
pushed out a window.
Wedge won't even be dead though.
He got pushed out a window. You heard that glass shatter, man.
That also goes on the fact that maybe that is playing into the new timeline idea.
Well, it doesn't technically make any sense. Only in the sense where like the first thing that technically breaks the real, like other than like Sephiroth kind of popping up, there are two main things. Okay, so Phil, I'll tell you right now, Barrett technically died in this game. Barrett got killed when Sephiroth stabbed him there, but then the whole like the whispers or the hell they're called, they reversed it because it wasn't part of the timeline, and he came back to life. That was like the first big difference. That was like the first change technically, but they don't really break the timeline until they go into that whole section. But at that point, if Biggs was living anyways, he would have already lived before, so it's kind of weird. Like nothing could have happened at that point that then would have changed Biggs's outcome.
But like he was closer to the ground level. Maybe somebody went up and got him. Like Tifa like threw him off the building. I don't know, but like you would have seen something about it.
That's I think where kind of the criticism lies, in that sometimes maybe even the writer doesn't actually understand when they're creating plot holes.
They probably don't.
Yeah, but there's a fun thing about plot holes and time travel. They can fix whatever the fuck they want.
But I mean, I feel like that's giving them so much credit, and that's where you get the convoluted story by just being like, oh, he just fell a couple of stories, even though it clearly looks like he falls, enough to kill him. Yeah.
Wedge? Oh yeah, no, he's like.
Yeah. The only thing I could really say to people that like are because like let's say if we even just split it in half, 50% people like the ending, 50% of people don't. Even if I could just say something, it would be that like anything, I think you have to wait till this is done. And if you didn't like the end of the story, you don't have to buy the next ones to wait to see what it's like. You can just look it up later when it's done. But like this game by itself was a really good game. Like I enjoyed pretty much all of the game. I liked the ending even by itself too. The thing that makes the ending
as well.
The thing that makes the ending either bad or good is just based off basically you playing Final Fantasy VII before. But like if you're a newcomer just coming in here, like I thought this was a good ending. Like the ending, it might not make sense to a newcomer. You might need to wait till like the future ones to be like, oh yes, now I remember that character was there. Yeah, sure, this makes a little more sense now. The whole when they come with part 2 or possibly a part 3, the whole thing could be ruined. Like the next part could be absolute dog shit, or the story could be terrible. It could be, but like we don't know till we get there.
I just think that there's no way that they're getting out of this without making people upset.
That's true, but once again, Final Fantasy VII is the most overhyped Final Fantasy game. I think the first thing when you asked us whether or not we liked the game, like the ending or not, I said I thought the story to Final Fantasy VII was shit, so I don't mind if they change it. Like that was, I like the characters, and I like the areas. This has the same
problem as Ocarina of Time. It was the first one of its type to be a different art style, and that's what everyone was like. Oh, Final Fantasy VII is the best. Look at the graphics; they're like 3D models. It's great. I didn't like 8, but I can already tell you 8 looked way better than 7. And it was also kind of shit, but at least they were like human shapes.
Why does Jess enjoy it so much?
Oh, Cam left. Yeah, he left video. That's fine. He's still.
I'm still here.
Right?
Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay.
Why does Jess enjoy it so much?
Why does Jess enjoy it so much? It was the first Final Fantasy game she played.
So, do you think there's like a level of nostalgia attached to it rather than the quality?
Probably
of the game?
all it is.
Like she also, and now that you know, she named Aerith Jess in the original game.
Aww.
She bought it like
Sucker.
the first week it came out, so she was younger, and she was pretty sad when the thing happened.
Yeah, when I first played it, she was OP, right? Like Aerith was No one technically has to be your healer, but like Aerith was your healer. Like that's how you were just playing the game, right? It was just,
well, she had the good limit break, like the healing limit break.
And then so like most of the time, in any Final Fantasy 7 game or in any Final Fantasy game, I always play with like the one healer on the team. So she was like my big like healer, and then she died. I was like, well, fuck, like what do I do now?
Yeah, my second play through the game, I'm like, oh, Tifa, right from the beginning, you're gonna have my healing magic.
So I talked to two people about this. One of them, I mean, both of them kind of approached me about it. So one was my friend Ryan, and then one was Mike.
Yep.
So Mike messaged me being like, "Hey, like, does Final Fantasy VII Remake actually end with like Sephiroth basically coming from a different timeline to fuck up shit in this timeline because he lost?" And I'm like it's hinted at heavily, and then I kind of explained it a little bit to him. He's like, "That's fucking awesome." I was like, "Yeah, I know you'd like that shit." Like,
yeah, it's
that's
pretty
the kind
sweet.
of stuff he likes. And then the other one was
some fucking JoJo shit,
and that's from someone like Mike doesn't play the Final Fantasy games. And then my friend Ryan, obviously, Ryan's the person who showed me all the Final Fantasy games, starting with 10 and then kind of backtracking to some of the other ones. Like, as I've said in the past week, we played Final Fantasy 9 together. We played Final Fantasy 7 together. We still play Final Fantasy 14 together. And he was asking about the ending, and I didn't want to spoil it too much because he's the hashtag patient gamer. He'll buy it in 20 years when it's down to $10. And then, but when I was talking to him about it, I basically just said that they changed the ending. Like there's a possibility that this isn't a remake as much as it is a possible sequel. Like events have changed based on something on the timeline, and he's like, well, that's good. He's like, I like the fact they're changing it. He's like, it makes it more worth it for me because he's the type of guy who doesn't want to spend all that money on a video game. He's the patient gamer, so he's like, it makes it more worth it to me to buy a new game than to buy just a 1-for-1 remake.
At the end of the day, I love that they changed it. I think that that's fucking sick because the original content will always be there.
Yeah, there's nothing stopping you.
You can always play that story. It'll always be there. Now, people obviously want just an updated graphics, updated battle system, and a 1-to-1 remake.
People don't know what they want.
That world would be way too big to do a 1-to-1 remake. Like,
it's just not realistic.
Have you got out of Midgar yet?
No.
No. Okay. When you go out of Midgar looks like a rock on the map. Like it's a tiny wee little rock.
Yeah.
And then you have this giant world, and you have to run across this giant world. If they scaled that out, it would actually take you like an hour and a half to walk to the next spot.
It's basically like anything though. It's like if we take Disney movies, are the big one recently. When they come with a Disney remake and they changed a bunch. I'll just use like Dumbo. That's a pretty widely hated one. Me and Meg watched Dumbo.
I didn't watch it.
We both liked it. As like I didn't like the original Dumbo. Shit scared the hell out of me. But we both watched the remake of Dumbo. I was like, yeah, it's just as good as the original one in like a sense. Like they both kind of suck. But then like people hated it. They're like, no, they changed everything. It's so stupid. Like they didn't use talking animals. They didn't get the elephant drunk. The whole movie's ruined. Why couldn't they just remake it? And then they take something like Lion King where they make a 1-for-1 exact remake. And the people are like, no, I don't want to pay to see the exact same movie again, you idiots. Like change something up. It's like, there's such this like weird balance. You need to change just the right amount. Like you need to find everything people hold precious and not touch that. But then if there's a part of the movie for 5 minutes people didn't really care about, yeah, maybe play with that and make them like a little bit more. Like it's such a precise thing. Right?
You have to ask, why do these people like these things? Are they liking it because of the actual amazing storytelling, the amazing content, or do they just like it because they saw that movie when they were 10 and it was the first movie they saw in theaters and they hold this like nostalgic attachment and these memories with it. And sometimes the game or the movie is just fantastic and amazing and it shouldn't be touched. And it's like I don't want them to remake Back to the Future. I don't want them to change it. I don't want them to do a 1-to-1 remake. It will. But I don't want them to do that. Now, if it comes out, yeah, I'll watch it and I'll probably be upset, but it is what it is, but my attachment to that movie is not just the fact that I think it's a well-made movie. It's that it took me to like a different world when I was a kid. Like I just have a lot of memories attached to it. And I think with anything in popular culture that people play when they're younger or at a different point in their life, they look at it with rose-tinted glasses. And fucking with it in any sort of way, they're like, even if it is a 1-to-1, people are going to be like, this isn't what I remember. That's because your nostalgia is like clouding your memory of the actual content. Like if playing Final Fantasy VII, you can look at the core mechanics and be like, this is a well-made game. But it might not be your favorite game in the world. That might have been your favorite game in the world if you didn't have any experience to JRPGs, if you had never played anything like that, if it took you to a different world, if you had nothing else to distract you and you played that game 60 hours a week when you were a kid and you spent an entire summer playing it. I think that all of those factors make games good for some people, and some people just can't acknowledge that.
Well, even when it comes to remakes, kind of like how I mentioned earlier, like the reason I don't care about the ending, and I think that like Andrew didn't care about the ending too much because we didn't necessarily like Final Fantasy VII that much. I would much rather people remake something I didn't like than remake something I do. Because if it's something I didn't like already, the worst that happens is I still don't like it, but there's a chance that now they're going to make something I like. If they take something I already like, the best that can happen is I still like it. Like, but there's a negative point at it, and like there's not really any negative to taking something that I don't care about. Which is why, it's like if they remake like something like Dumbo, once again, for instance, never liked Dumbo that much to begin with. You remake Dumbo, if it's bad, I didn't lose out on anything. But if you remake like, Hercules,
if they remake Hercules and they put no music in it at all, I'll fucking hate it.
That's the thing. There's so many things where if you take something that people love a lot more and you remake it, I don't know why people want all these things to be remade. Like I would rather, if anything, I would rather just like remasters to some things. Like if they're so old they're like unplayable, remastered you can't really mess with. It's just slightly upping the graphics and the playability. But
Shadow of Colossus did that.
Yeah, like a full remake.
It was very hard to play originally. Now it's on PS4 and it's
Resident Evil 2 and 3, the way that the camera and like your movement in those games just fucking terrible. But in the new ones with the new engine, just absolutely amazing.
Yep.
But there's a lot of people that don't like 3 though right now, right?
Yeah,
well, a lot of people
because they cut content.
Yeah, they cut some spots out.
So I mean, that's another example too. But was 3 even that good of a game?
So the rule of Resident Evil is there's an okay one, there's a better one, and then there's a bad one, and then it goes there's an okay one, there's a good one, and there's an okay one, and then there's a bad one. So they did Resident Evil 1, it was good. Resident Evil 2 was fantastic. Resident Evil 3 was okay. At best, we'll say it's okay. Resident Evil 4, good game. Resident Evil 5 had some improvement combat-wise, but otherwise it was not as good. And then 6 was a fucking nightmare. So realistically, 7 was good. 8 has a possibility of being decent, but they shouldn't make 9.
Well, they're doing 4, so...
They are supposedly remastering 4, or remaking 4. If they do 4 with the Resident Evil 2 combat... It'll be the best
that's
remake
what they're
ever.
Saying. That's what they're saying.
Now, do you think this talk would have been more interesting if one of us hated the ending, though?
It'd be a little more probably heated, but like I can see why people don't like it. But I'm still in the same boat. Like I didn't like it in the original.
Now, so, Phil, I'll give your friend a slight pass because at least he watched you play almost all of it. The only thing if you play a game and you hate it, that's fine. Like, that's your choice. But I hate when people don't play a game and hate it. That's much worse. But at least if your friend hated it...
it's not like you couldn't even say, the game played really nice.
Yeah, at least he watched
I understand the frustration with it, man. Like, it makes sense. Like I said, if they came out with Back to the Future and then, in the second one, he doesn't go forward in time or something. I don't really know. But if they just changed it in some way that I was like, this is stupid, I'd probably be upset because I have such a nostalgic attachment to it. But going back to what I said before, the original 3 movies will always be there, so I can still watch them. It's just sometimes, fucking with people's like childhood and that stuff can really ruin
There's
things.
a big risk factor, and all we can do is wait till the future parts come out and just see what happens then. Like, just take it one part at a time, right? Like, I think all of us enjoyed this part if we just cut it to just this, not thinking about the original Final Fantasy VII, not thinking about like what the next part's going to be, just looking at what we played. I thought it was worth the money I spent. So
it's an amazing.
There's only the one part I didn't enjoy. Other than that, I enjoyed the rest of the game.
I literally, as I said, I've never been a huge 7 fan to begin with, but I liked it more than the original 7 so far. At least if I compare it for part, because I like the characters in 7, and they put so much detail into the characters here. They gave them so much like character. I never liked Aerith when I played 7. Was one of the big things. That's why like I didn't care when she died because I just didn't like her. But this actually makes her likable. Like, so it gave her a lot more character. Obviously, people like Tifa. Always best girl. That's just a fact.
Tifa.